There comes a time in life when the weight of trying to control everything becomes too heavy to carry. You plan, you push, you fight, and yet the more you try to force life to move your way, the more it resists. Have you ever felt that way, as if no matter how hard you work, no matter how many times you pray for things to go your way, something still holds you back? Perhaps, deep inside, God is whispering something that your striving has silenced. Let go, stop forcing, trust me. You see, there's a difference between perseverance and forcing life. Perseverance is trusting God through the process. Forcing life is trying to make things happen on your own terms and timeline. One is faith-driven, the other is fear-driven. And when fear drives your actions, peace disappears. You lose the stillness that allows God's power to move freely in your life. Surrender invites God's power. It doesn't mean giving up. It means giving over. It's the act of saying, Lord, I can't do this without you. When you stop forcing life and start surrendering to God, everything begins to change, not necessarily because the situation changes, but because you do. Your perspective shifts, your heart softens, your spirit rests. You begin to see that God's plan was always greater than your pressure. Many people think surrender is weakness. They think letting go means losing control or admitting defeat. But surrender in God's kingdom is the opposite. It's the moment when strength truly begins. The most powerful people in the Bible were those who knew when to stop forcing and start trusting. Moses tried to deliver his people in his own strength and ended up in the wilderness. Only when he surrendered to God's timing did he become the instrument of deliverance. Abraham tried to force God's promise by having a son with Hagar, but only through surrender did he receive the child of promise, Isaac. Even Jesus, in his final hour, showed us the deepest picture of surrender when he prayed, "Not my will, but yours be done." That prayer changed the world. When you stop forcing life, you make room for miracles. The very things you've been chasing often start to come together the moment you release them into God's hands. Because faith doesn't mean making everything happen, it means believing that God already has. So many people live in tension because they're trying to control what's out of their control. They're clinging to relationships that aren't healthy, holding on to jobs that steal their peace, forcing doors open that God has clearly closed. But forcing what's not meant for you is like trying to fit a puzzle piece where it doesn't belong. It might seem close, but it will never bring the complete picture. God has a rhythm, a divine order. When you fight that order, frustration fills your soul. But when you align with it, when you choose surrender over struggle, you begin to flow in grace instead of grinding in exhaustion. That's where peace lives. That's where joy returns. That's where the Holy Spirit moves. Maybe right now you feel stuck. You've prayed, you've tried, and nothing seems to work. You're asking, why isn't God doing something? But what if God is waiting for you to stop doing something? What if He's waiting for your surrender so He can start working in ways you've never imagined? The truth is, God doesn't need our control. He needs our cooperation. He doesn't need our pushing. He needs our permission to move. When you take your hands off the steering wheel of life and say, Lord, you drive, you're not losing direction. You're finding it. When you stop forcing life, you also stop living in fear of missing out. You stop comparing your story to someone else's. You stop measuring your success by the world's standards. You begin to rest in the confidence that what's meant for you won't pass you by. Because God's blessings don't need to be forced. They find you in His perfect timing. Have you ever noticed how tightly we hold on to things when we're afraid to lose them? We hold on to people, opportunities, plans, even pain. But whatever you hold too tightly, you end up suffocating. It's only when you open your hand that God can place something new in it. Some of you are holding onto a season that's already over, forcing something that once worked but doesn't anymore. You're trying to breathe life into something that God has already called finished. Let it go. Not everything that ends is a loss. Sometimes it's the start of something divine. There is a sacred beauty in surrender. It's in the quiet moment when you say, God, I trust you even though I don't understand. It's when tears fall, yet faith remains. It's when you choose peace over panic and worship over worry. That's when heaven draws near. God's power is not released through control, but through trust. The same God who calms the seas can calm your heart, but he won't compete with your control. The moment you surrender, his power flows where your pressure once lived. Think about a river. When you fight against its current, you exhaust yourself, but when you surrender and float, the current carries you effortlessly to where you're meant to go. God's will works the same way. Stop fighting the current. Trust the flow. There are seasons where God allows closed doors not to punish you, but to protect you. He removes certain things not to harm you, but to heal you. What you thought was a delay might actually be his way of preparing you for something far greater. You'll never see that while forcing life, but you'll understand it when you surrender. So many of us pray for God's will, but deep down, we only want it if it looks like our plan. True surrender says, even if it looks different, even if it hurts, even if I don't see it now, I still trust you. That's where transformation begins. When you stop forcing life, you discover that peace isn't the absence of problems, it's the presence of trust. Life won't suddenly become easy, but your heart will become steady. The storm might not end, but you'll realize that the one who commands the winds is in your boat. Surrender doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. It doesn't mean sitting still. It means moving with divine purpose instead of human pressure. You act, but you act in peace. You move, but you move in alignment. You trust that every no from God is protecting a greater yes. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in life come right after surrender. When you finally let go of your plans, God reveals his. When you release your fear, he fills you with faith. When you stop forcing, he starts forming something beautiful within you. Even nature teaches us this truth. The flower doesn't force itself to bloom. It opens naturally when the time is right. The sun doesn't rush to rise. It waits for its appointed hour. If creation trusts the Creator's timing, why shouldn't we? There's freedom in surrender. There's joy in letting go. Because when you stop forcing life, you make room for the supernatural. God begins to weave together details you couldn't see, move hearts you couldn't reach, and open doors you couldn't unlock. Every time you try to force something, you're essentially saying, I don't trust you, God. But every time you surrender, you're saying, I know you've got this. Faith doesn't force, faith follows. It rests, it waits, and it believes that even in the silence, God is working. Maybe right now you're in a season where everything feels uncertain. The door you prayed for didn't open. The relationship you thought would last ended. The opportunity slipped away. You feel lost. But friend, maybe it's because God is writing a better story than the one you were trying to force. Sometimes what we call disappointment is actually divine appointment. God had to close that door to open another. He had to remove that person to bring peace. He had to end that season so he could birth a new one. And you'll only see it once you stop pushing and start trusting. If you want to experience God's best, you must be willing to release your version of best, because his ways are higher, his thoughts are deeper, and his plans are better than anything you could imagine. Surrender isn't a one-time act, it's a daily choice. Every morning you wake up and decide whether to live by control or by trust. And every time you choose trust, you invite God's power into your day. So today, stop forcing life. Stop trying to manipulate what only God can manage. Take your hands off the wheel, breathe, and whisper, Lord, I trust you. It's in that moment that your heart finds rest, your mind finds clarity, and your soul finds peace. Remember this, you don't have to make everything happen. You just have to make space for God to move. What you release, he replaces with something far better. What you surrender, he transforms. What you let go of, he redeems. When you stop forcing life, everything changes, not because the world changes, but because your heart finally aligns with heaven. The pressure lifts, the striving stops, and peace flows like a river. Surrender invites God's power. And in that surrender, you'll find what you were searching for all along. Not control, not perfection, but a relationship with the one who makes all things new in his perfect time. So let go, trust him. Rest in his plan, because when you stop forcing life, everything truly changes. There is a moment in life when your heart becomes weary from trying to make everything work according to your plan. You try to hold the pieces together, push harder when things resist, and fight to keep control over outcomes that were never meant to be yours to command. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispers, "Let it go." It's the same voice that has guided countless souls through storms, the voice that says, "Be still and know that I am God." Letting go is not giving up. It's not failure, it's faith. It is the sacred act of surrendering what you cannot control to the one who controls it all. It's trusting that God's hands are stronger, wiser, and gentler than your own. And when you finally let go, something extraordinary happens, growth begins. When you stop forcing life, you make room for something greater than your plans, divine timing. We live in a world that glorifies striving, the idea that success comes only through relentless effort and endless control. But God's kingdom operates differently. His blessings don't flow through control, they flow through trust. When you surrender the outcome, you're saying, "Lord, I don't know how this will work, but I believe you do." And that belief opens the door to miracles. Many times, we don't realize that our constant pushing is the very thing blocking the peace we seek. You can't receive what your hands are too busy forcing. You can't hear God's whisper when your thoughts are shouting with worry. You can't grow when you're rooted in fear. The soil of your soul must be loosened by surrender for anything divine to take root. Look at nature. The trees don't force their growth. The river doesn't force its flow. The flowers don't force themselves to bloom. They yield to the rhythm of creation. They trust the process. In the same way, when you stop forcing your life, you align yourself with the rhythm of God's grace. You begin to understand that every delay, every detour, and every disappointment has purpose. Sometimes God closes a door not because He's punishing you, but because He's protecting you. He knows what's on the other side, and sometimes what looks like rejection is actually redirection. You may not see it now, but one day you'll look back and thank Him for the doors that didn't open. The very thing you once cried over might become the thing you thank Him for later. That's the mystery of divine timing. When you let go, what's meant for you comes in ways you could never have planned. Growth begins where control ends. Think about a seed. If you dig it up every day to check whether it's growing, you'll kill it. Growth requires trust, the unseen process beneath the surface. The same is true for your life. When you stop trying to manipulate outcomes and let God work in the unseen, your roots of faith grow deeper. You start to experience peace not because everything makes sense, but because you've decided to trust even when it doesn't. Letting go also means releasing the need to understand everything. Some of life's hardest moments are not meant to be figured out immediately. They're meant to be walked through in faith. You don't need to have all the answers to have peace. You just need to know who holds the answers. There are times when God will strip things away from you, not to hurt you, but to heal you. He removes what you cling to so tightly because it's keeping you from clinging to Him. He'll allow certain doors to shut so your heart can open to something better. It's in the letting go that transformation happens. When you stop forcing life, you stop trying to be your own savior. You stop believing the lie that everything depends on your strength. You come to realize that grace is not earned through striving, it's received through surrender. You find rest in the truth that God is not asking you to figure it all out. He's asking you to trust that He already has. The human heart is not designed to carry the weight of control. That's why anxiety grows in the soil of self-reliance. We were never meant to be our own source of security. True peace doesn't come from knowing the future, it comes from knowing the one who holds it. When you let go of the need to control every outcome, you allow God's peace to fill the empty spaces fear once occupied. Letting go doesn't mean life suddenly becomes easy. The waves may still crash, the winds may still blow, but something shifts inside you. You stop fighting the storm and start trusting the captain. You realize that sometimes the storm isn't meant to destroy you, it's meant to steer you. Maybe you've been holding onto something that's slowly breaking you, a relationship that's draining your spirit, a dream that no longer fits the season you're in, a plan that's causing more confusion than peace. God is saying, let it go, not because He wants to take something good from you, but because He wants to give you something greater. When you let go of what's not meant for you, you make room for what is. There's a story in every believer's life, a season where everything they planned fell apart, only for God to rebuild it into something far better. You might be in that season now. It might feel like everything is slipping through your fingers. But sometimes that's exactly where God wants you, empty-handed, so He can fill you with His best. Growth is never comfortable. It often comes after letting go of something familiar, but just because it's painful doesn't mean it's purposeless. Every ending carries within it the seed of a new beginning. The pruning may hurt, but it's preparing you for greater fruit. The letting go is not loss, it's preparation for gain. When you stop forcing life, you start noticing the beauty in God's timing. You realize that peace doesn't come when everything works out. It comes when you stop trying to force it to. You begin to find joy not in control, but in trust. You start to rest instead of resist. You start to see blessings where before you only saw burdens. The truth is, you can't grow while you're gripping the past. You can't step into the new while clinging to the old. The very act of growth requires release. A butterfly can't emerge without leaving the cocoon. The seed can't sprout without breaking open. Likewise, your soul can't flourish until you're willing to let go of what no longer serves your faith journey. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying what's not yours to bear. It's the courage to say, God, even if I don't understand this, I trust that you do. It's choosing peace over panic, faith over fear, and surrender over striving. It's realizing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing, to simply stand still and let God move. When you let go, your perspective shifts. You begin to see that your story isn't falling apart, it's falling into place. What once felt like a setback becomes a setup for something greater. What you thought was a delay becomes divine protection. You start to see that God was never late, you were just impatient. There is freedom in releasing the illusion of control. There is strength in surrender, and there is growth in letting go. Because when you let go, you give God the space to transform what you once tried to manipulate. You allow Him to take the broken pieces and shape them into something beautiful. Every great story of faith begins with surrender. Abraham let go of his homeland and found a promise. Moses let go of fear and found his purpose. Peter let go of the boat and found his calling. Jesus let go of his will and fulfilled salvation. Every act of letting go led to growth, because letting go always leads to something greater when God is involved. Maybe today is your moment to let go, to stop fighting what's not working, to stop forcing what's not flowing, to stop carrying what's too heavy. Maybe God is asking you to release your grip, to trust His timing, and to believe that He's working even when you can't see it. If you've been trying to make something happen and it keeps resisting, it might not be rejection, it might be God's redirection. If you've been holding onto pain, anger, or disappointment, release it. You can't heal while holding on to what hurt you. Letting go is how you begin to live again, and when you do, you'll discover that life begins to open up in ways you never expected. The peace you've been searching for will find you. The doors that refused to open before will unlock effortlessly. The things that once felt impossible will suddenly fall into place, not because you forced them, but because you finally trusted God enough to stop. The moment you stop forcing life, you make space for miracles. You begin to notice divine fingerprints in the smallest moments. You realize that nothing is random. Every delay, every detour, every disappointment was orchestrated for your growth. So today, breathe, loosen your grip, release what you can't control, trust the one who holds it all. The moment you stop forcing life is the moment you'll find peace that doesn't make sense, joy that doesn't fade, and strength that doesn't depend on circumstances. Letting go doesn't mean you've lost, it means you've learned. It means you've grown enough to understand that God's plan is better, His timing is perfect, and His ways are higher. When you stop forcing life, everything changes, not because life suddenly becomes easy, but because you finally allow grace to flow where fear once ruled. Let go of the need to know. Let go of the need to control. Let go of the fear that says you can't live without what God has already called you to release. When you do, you'll find that peace isn't something you chase, it's something that comes when you stop chasing. And that's when you'll understand the beautiful truth. Letting go leads to growth. It leads to freedom. It leads to joy. It leads to the life you were always meant to live, one guided not by your own striving, but by God's perfect, gentle, and powerful hand.